You'd think it would be easy reviewing a collection of some of the fighting game community's most beloved titles, a series of games that are regarded as some of the best in the genre, games that haven't been available to the public in some cases in nearly 30 years. Rating these should be a slam dunk, and yet the passage of time has made me want to take a critical look at these more than ever. I'm in a rare position reviewing Marvel vs. Capcom Collection. I played all of these games when they were contemporary. I own most of the original games in their original console releases, and I still fire them up every now and then. There's no denying that I love every game in this collection, so rather than review them individually, I want to look at the collection as a whole to make my determination. Marvel vs. Capcom Collection comprises 7 games: X-Men Children of the Atom, Marvel Superheroes, X-Men vs. Street Fighter, Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter, both Marvel vs. Capcom games, and the side-scrolling Punisher beat-em-up that started it all. You can play either the Western or Japanese versions of these games, which for some of them makes a substantial difference. In the Japanese release of Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter, Norimaro, a character created by Capcom and comedian Noritaki Kinashi, was available as a selectable character. Norimaro's data existed in the Western release of the game, but was locked out due to a dispute with Marvel at the time, meaning fans that don't have access to the Japanese version have never been able to try out this character, and I'm one of those fans. So getting the chance to finally use Norimaro despite being a joke character is like playing a piece of lost media. But Norimaro isn't the only hidden character you can access. All of the cool secret characters from across the games in this series are unlocked by default, like Anita in Marvel Superheroes, Roll in MVC1, Akuma in both X-Men Children of the Atom and X-Men vs. Street Fighter, and the loads of palette-swapped characters in Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter. All of those characters are in both versions of each game. Having the option to play either version is a cool addition, and while I'm sure there are other differences between versions of each title, I'm not fully aware of them. You can do a lot more with each title than just choose which language they're presented in, however. Each of the games comes with a handful of display options. By default, every game has a border on either side of the original 4x3 display, with a scanline filter over the top of it. It's a perfectly serviceable presentation, but you can customize it to your liking, and each game in the collection will remember which setting you chose for that specific title. Purists will want to stick with the pixel-perfect 4x3 modes, and though I don't really love scanline filters in older pixel art games, I found that the default option Capcom went with for MVC Collection was ideal for me. Turning it off made things look just a bit wrong, in my opinion. I spent hundreds of hours playing these games on my parents' CRT as a kid, so I don't think my eyes want to see these games without scanlines. That said, my display choices varied on a game-to-game basis. Of the entire collection, I spent the most time playing X-Men vs. Street Fighter as a kid, yet despite that, I found myself actually liking the 16:9 option for this game, and for some reason, only this game. Other ones just looked off or weird to me, despite me having spent a lot less time playing them. There's no right or wrong way to experience these games. None of the games in the Marvel vs. Capcom collection are native ports. They're emulated based on what, in my decidedly non-expert opinion, are the CPS2 arcade versions, and the emulation feels to me to be incredibly accurate. I'm not a pro fighting game player by any means, but I do have decades of experience with these games, and they don't feel any different to me than the Sega Saturn versions I grew up with. I didn't feel any perceptible amount of input lag on either PS5 or Switch in any of the games in the collection. I spent most of my time preparing this review with the PS4 version of Marvel vs. Capcom Collection on PS5, though I was also supplied with a review code for the Switch version, and I did some quick technical tests with it in both handheld and docked mode. The Switch version also runs great. Outside of the games themselves, Capcom has also included a museum with tons of content for each title, complete with concept art, marketing materials, and even game design documents. Capcom's art from this era was on another level, particularly Bengus's work in Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Each piece of art is so dynamic and full of energy. I would pay the price of admission just to look at these. There's something just so cool about being able to see how Capcom designed these genre-defining games. In addition to this, the collection itself has a list of fighter awards you can acquire. On every platform except Switch, these are tied into that platform's own achievement system, and they range from simple tasks, such as simply trying out every game, to truly monumental ones, like completing every game in the collection with every character. Though I suspect some of you will blaze through even that fairly quickly. And that's okay, because fighting games' length doesn't really matter. This is all about the joy of battle, of taking on opponents and doing your best, especially online in the modern era, which leads me to the elephant in the room. During my review period, I wasn't able to find anyone to play online with. And that's normal. Not many people had the game yet, and there's no crossplay, so even among those that I knew that did have it, if we weren't on the same platform, we couldn't play together. But from what I've learned, the experience seems as though it will be similar to the previous Capcom fighting collection. You can queue up for casual or ranked matches, create your own lobby, and select any number of games in the collection to be matched into. And while you're waiting, you can either browse the museum or play any one of the games in the collection. Pretty standard stuff for the fighting game genre these days, but appreciated nonetheless. Now, I know I said I don't want to get too granular about each game in the collection, but let's talk about them just a little bit. Like I mentioned before, the emulation quality here is excellent. It's as accurate as it needs to be, even for those of us that are familiar with the original releases. If you're a fighting game fan, particularly of the Marvel series, this is like a Criterion collection of fighting games. These are essential plays for any fan of the genre. Going back and taking a holistic look at the Versus series and its roots was an interesting trip down memory lane for me. After years of Marvel vs. Capcom, I forgot just how much I loved previous Versus entries, to say nothing of the decidedly slower X-Men and Marvel games that preceded them. Playing this collection is like stepping into a time machine, back into the golden age of fighting games. I forgot just how well animated Marvel superheroes in particular was, and seeing characters like Shuma Gorath, Spiral, Jill Valentine, and Amingo made me so happy. If you're a fan of fighting games, Marvel vs. Capcom is an absolute must-own title. These games have been locked away from modern platforms for far too long, and I'm grateful to Capcom for bringing them back. If you're looking to expand your fighting game library, this is the best way to do it. At least until Capcom Fighting Collection 2 comes out.